Our topic is about term structure of interest rate. You remember that once we were discussing about the risk structure of interest rate, we were discussing that we assume that the bonds, they have the same term structure. So it means that we were assuming that the maturity of the bonds that we are comparing are the same. In the term structure topic, we assume that the risk structure of the bonds are the same. So it means that we assume that the bonds that we want to compare, they have the same issuer, they have issued by the same corporation or government. So that's why the risk of all of them, the income in consideration and the liquidity of them are the same. The only difference between the bond is the term or the maturity. Some bonds, they have shorter maturity, and some bonds, they are the long-term bonds. So based on the expectation theory is saying that the interest rate of a long-term bond is equal to the average of the short-term interest rate that the people expect to occur over a life of a long-term bond. Is it so complicated? Okay, I repeat again. Let's assume that we have a 5-year bond. So it means that we have a bond that it will mature in 5 years. So we want to know that based on the expectation theory, how we can calculate the expected interest rate of a 5-year bond. So we know that we don't have any definite idea about the interest rate of the future because we only know today interest rate. We don't know that what is happening about the interest rate in future, next year, next 2 years, and next 5 years. Just we can predict that what is happening. So that's why once we want to talk about interest rate in future, we call this expected interest rate. If I'm talking about the interest rate in next year, I'm talking it expected interest rate for the next year, expected interest rate for the next 2 years. So once we want to know that how much is the expected interest rate of a 5-year bond, so based on the expectation theory is saying that the expected interest rate of a 5-year bond is equal to average of the expected short-term interest rate until 5 years. So until 5 years, how many short-term interest rate we have? We have interest rate of the next year, then we have interest rate of the next 2 years, then we have interest rate of the next 3 years, then interest rate of the 4 years and 5 years. So that's why for each of them, it's going to be a short-term interest rate. So based on the expectation theory, the interest rate of a 5-year bond is equal to the average of the short-term interest rate within 5 years. So based on the expectation theory is saying that people or investors, they don't have any particular preference about the term of the bond. So it means that they don't prefer one short-term bonds over the long-term bonds or vice versa. What is important for them is the return of the bond. So that's why, based on the expectation theory, if you have these two scenarios that I have written here, based on the expectation theory, the return of these two scenarios should be the same. Why? Because based on expectation theory, the term of these two scenarios are the same. Both of them, they are 2-year bond. So expectation theory is saying that as long as the term of the bonds are the same, so they have the same interest, they have the same return. So now we want to prove this claim or the proposition of the expectation theory. So how to prove that? We consider 2 different scenarios and then we calculate the interest or earning of these 2 scenarios. We put them equal and then we see that what will happen. So the first scenario is the scenario that is saying that, imagine that the whole story is that we want to buy bond for 2 years. So if we want to buy bond for 2 years, we have 2 options. The first option is that we buy a 1-year bond. After 1 year, when it matures, we buy another 1-year bond. So this is the first scenario. In the second scenario, instead of buying 2 1-year bonds, we buy a 2-year bond. So immediately from here, we just buy a 2-year bond. And then we don't care that what will happen to the bond the next year or how much is the interest rate of the next year. So now let's start with this. Imagine that, for example, for simplicity, we imagine that the amount that we want to spend or we want to invest is $1. So that's why $1, for example, at the end of year one, how much is our interest, how much we have earned on the bond if we invest 1 year. So at the end of $1 at the end of year one, so the interest that we are earning is this much, right? Simple interest rate. Then at the end of year two, how much we are earning. So at the end of year one, we have earned this much. Then we invest this amount of money and we buy another 1-year bond. So this amount of the money that we have earned, we invest, and then we buy another 1-year bond. For another 1-year bond, the interest rate of the next year is the expected interest rate of T plus 1. So this is our earning at the end of year one. So then how much we have invested? We have invested $1. So it means that if I want to know that what is my profit or what is my clean earning after we deduct our investment, so it means that our earning will be equal to 1 plus expected interest rate of the first year multiply 1 plus expected interest rate of the second year minus the amount that we have spent or we have invested, which is $1. Then I open this bracket. Once I open this bracket, so it means that is equal to 1 plus I T E plus I E T plus 1 plus expected interest rate of the first year multiplied by expected interest rate of the second year and minus 1. These two, they are cancelling out each other, right? We reach to this point. This is interest rate. This is also interest rate. Let's say that, for example, if this interest rate is 10%, and then this interest rate is also 10%, once we multiply them to each other, so the result will be 0.01, which is a very small number. So since both of these interest rates itself is a small number, once it becomes square or we multiply them in each other, so the number is very small. So that's why it's better that we skip this part, so and we assume that it is almost equal to 0. So that's why I assume that it is equal to 0. So it means that what is remaining for us after these two are cancelling each other, this one we assume that it is equal to 0. So the remaining is expected interest rate of the first year plus expected interest rate of the second year. So this is our earning. Let's move to the second scenario. Second scenario is that at once we buy a 2-year bond. So how much is the earning of the 2-year bond? So the interest that we are earning is, of course, 1 plus I 2t power 2. Am I right? Because at once we buy for a 2-year bond. So now how much is our earning? This is the interest. This is I, interest. So how much is our earning? Our earning is that the amount that we gain minus the amount that we invest. So that's why it is I plus I 2t. This is the long-term bond, right? So that's why the interest is 2t. Here we are talking about the short-term interest rate. So that's why 1 by 1 we add. This is the short term of the next year, the short term of the next 2 years. So here we are talking about the long-term interest rate. That's why we put it 2t. And then power 2 and then minus 1. 1 is the amount that we have invested. So I open the bracket. Once you open the bracket is 1 plus 2i 2t. We can put 1 expected here as well. And plus ie 2t power 2 minus 1. Again, these two one are canceling out each other. Again, in the interest rate, square of interest rate, this interest rate itself is very small number. Once it is squared, yet it is another small number, so we can skip this number, and the remaining is 2 expected interest rate for the 2-year bond. Expectation theory is saying that no matter which strategy you are using, expectation theory is saying that the earning of these two strategies should be equal. So that's why I put these two earnings equal to each other, and it's gonna be ITE plus ITE plus 1 is equal to 2IE 2T. And then if I bring this to this side, so it means that I can divide this whole thing by 2, and then this 2 will be removed from here. So what is remaining? Isn't it similar to the average formula? So it means that the expected interest rate of a 2-year bond is equal to the average of the short-term interest rate over the life of this bond, which is a 2-year bond. So the short-term interest rate of the first year, the short-term interest rate of the second year. So it means that if I want to show it like this, I can, for example, draw that here is today, then we have year 1, then we have year 2. So here interest rate, for example, is I, here is IT, and here interest rate, expected short-term interest rate is IT1, because here is 1 year, then we move to another 1 year. So it means that these are the short-term interest rate. Once we are here, so we expect another short-term interest rate. So that's why we call them short-term interest rate. But if we want to overall look at the interest rate for the long term, so the interest rate of a 2-year bond, we show it with I2T. And then we show that the interest rate of a 2-year bond is equal to average of the interest rate over the period of 2 years. So later on, we generalize this formula, and we can say that even if we have the bonds with longer maturity, the interest rate of that bond is equal to average of the short term of interest rate over the life of this long-term bond. And this is exactly the explanation that we started the topic. We